Part 3 of Chapter 11 of Book 1 of the Wealth of Nations. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Stephen Escalera. The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. Part 3 of Chapter 11 of Book 1 of the Rent of Land. Digression concerning the variations in the value of silver during the course of the 4 last centuries. First period. In 1350, and for some time before, the average price of the quarter of wheat in England seems not to have been estimated lower than 4 ounces of silver, Tower weight, equal to about 20 shillings of our present money. From this price it seems to have fallen gradually to 2 ounces of silver, equal to about 10 shillings of our present money, the price at which we find it estimated in the beginning of the 16th century, and at which it seems to have continued to be estimated till about 1570. In 1350, being the 25th of Edward III, was enacted what is called the Statute of Labourers. In the preamble, it complains much of the insolence of servants who endeavoured to raise their wages upon their masters. It therefore ordains that all servants and labourers should, for the future, be contented with the same wages and liveries. Liveries in those times signified not only clothes, but provisions, which they had been accustomed to receive in the 20th year of the king, and the 4 preceding years. That, upon this account, their livery wheat should nowhere be estimated higher than 10 pence a bushel, and that it should always be in the option of the master to deliver them either the wheat or the money. 10 pence a bushel, therefore, had in the 25th of Edward III been reckoned to a very moderate price of wheat, since it required a particular statute to oblige servants to accept of it in exchange for their usual livery of provisions; and it had been reckoned a reasonable price 10 years before that, or in the 16th year of the king, the term to which the statute refers. But in the 16th year of Edward III, 10 pence contained about half an ounce of silver, Tower weight, and was nearly equal to half a crown of our present money. 4 ounces of silver, Tower weight, therefore, equal to 6 shillings and 8 pence of the money of those times, and to near 20 shillings of that of the present, must have been reckoned a moderate price for the quarter of 8 bushels. This statute is surely a better evidence of what was reckoned, in those times, a moderate price of grain, than the prices of some particular years, which have generally been recorded by historians and other writers on account of their extraordinary dearness or cheapness, and from which, therefore, it is difficult to form any judgment concerning what may have been the ordinary price. There are, besides, other reasons for believing that, in the beginning of the 14th century, and for some time before, the common price of wheat was not less than 4 ounces of silver the quarter, and that of other grain in proportion. In 1309, Ralph de Born, prior of St. Augustine's, Canterbury, gave a feast upon his installation day, of which William Thorne has preserved, not only the bill of fare, but the prices of many particulars. In that feast were consumed, first, 53 quarters of wheat, which cost 19 pounds, or 7 shillings and 2 pence a quarter, equal to about 21 shillings and 6 pence of our present money. Secondly, 58 quarters of malt, which cost 17 pounds 10 shillings, or 6 shillings a quarter, equal to about 18 shillings of our present money. Thirdly, 20 quarters of oats, which cost 4 pounds, or 4 shillings a quarter, equal to about 12 shillings of our present money. The prices of malt and oats seem here to lie higher than their ordinary proportion to the price of wheat. These prices are not recorded on account of their extraordinary dearness or cheapness, but are mentioned accidentally, as the prices actually paid for large quantities of grain consumed at a feast, which was famous for its magnificence. In 1262, being the 51st of Henry III, was revived an ancient statute, called the Assize of Bread and Ale, which, the king says in the preamble, had been made in the times of his progenitors, sometime kings of England. It is probably, therefore, as old at least as the time of his grandfather, Henry II, and may have been as old as the Conquest. It regulates the price of bread according as the prices of wheat may happen to be, from 1 shilling to 20 shillings the quarter of the money of those times. But statutes of this kind are generally presumed to provide with equal care for all deviations from the middle price for those below it as well as for those above it. 10 shillings, therefore, containing 6 ounces of silver, Tower weight, and equal to about 30 shillings of our present money, must, upon this supposition, have been reckoned the middle price of the quarter of wheat when this statute was first enacted, and must have continued to be so in the 51st of Henry III. We cannot, therefore, be very wrong in supposing that the middle price was not less than one third of the highest price at which this statute regulates the price of bread, or than 6 shillings and 8 pence of the money of those times, containing 4 ounces of silver, Tower weight. From these different facts, therefore, we seem to have some reason to conclude that about the middle of the 14th century, and for a considerable time before, the average or ordinary price of the quarter of wheat was not supposed to be less than 4 ounces of silver, Tower weight. From about the middle of the 14th to the beginning of the 16th century, what was reckoned the reasonable and moderate, that is, the ordinary or average price of wheat, seems to have sunk gradually to about one half of this price, so as at last to have fallen to about 2 ounces of silver, Tower weight, equal to about 10 shillings of our present money. It continued to be estimated at this price till about 1570. In the household book of Henry, the 5th Earl of Northumberland, drawn up in 1512, there are two different estimations of wheat. In one of them it is computed at 6 shillings and 8 pence the quarter, in the other at 5 shillings and 8 pence only. In 1512, 6 shillings and 8 pence contained only 2 ounces of silver, Tower weight, and were equal to about 10 shillings of our present money. From the 25th of Edward III to the beginning of the reign of Elizabeth, during the space of more than 200 years, 6 shillings and 8 pence, it appears from several different statutes, had continued to be considered as what is called the moderate and reasonable, that is, the ordinary or average price of wheat. The quantity of silver, however, contained in that nominal sum was, during the course of this period, continually diminishing in consequence of some alterations which were made in the coin. But the increase of the value of silver had, it seems, so far compensated the diminution of the quantity of it contained in the same nominal sum, that the legislature did not think it worth while to attend to this circumstance. Thus, in 1436, it was enacted that wheat might be exported without a license when the price was so low as 6 shillings and 8 pence, and in 1463 it was enacted that no wheat should be imported if the price was not above 6 shillings and 8 pence the quarter. The legislature had imagined that when the price was so low, there could be no inconveniency in exportation, but that when it rose higher, it became prudent to allow of importation. 6 shillings and 8 pence, therefore, containing about the same quantity of silver as 13 shillings and 4 pence of our present money, one third part less than the same nominal sum contained in the time of Edward III, had in those times been considered as what is called the moderate and reasonable price of wheat. In 1554, by the 1st and 2nd of Philip and Mary, and in 1558, by the 1st of Elizabeth, the exportation of wheat was in the same manner prohibited, whenever the price of the quarter should exceed 6 shillings and 8 pence, which did not then contain 2 pennyworth more silver than the same nominal sum does at present. But it had soon been found that to restrain the exportation of wheat till the price was so very low, was in reality to prohibit it altogether. In 1562, therefore, by the 5th of Elizabeth, the exportation of wheat was allowed from certain ports whenever the price of the quarter should not exceed 10 shillings, containing nearly the same quantity of silver as the like nominal sum does at present. This price had at this time, therefore, been considered as what is called the moderate and reasonable price of wheat. It agrees nearly with the estimation of the Northumberland book in 1512. That in France the average price of grain was, in the same manner, much lower in the end of the 15th and beginning of the 16th century than in the 2 centuries preceding, has been observed both by Mr. Dupré de Saint-Mars and by the elegant author of the Essay on the Policy of Grain. Its price, during the same period, had probably sunk in the same manner through the greater part of Europe. This rise in the value of silver, in proportion to that of corn, may either have been owing altogether to the increase of the demand for that metal, in consequence of increasing improvement and cultivation, the supply, in the mean time, continuing the same as before, or, the demand continuing the same as before, it may have been owing altogether to the gradual diminution of the supply, the greater part of the mines which were then known in the world being much exhausted, and, consequently, the expense of working them much increased. Or it may have been owing partly to the one and partly to the other of those two circumstances. In the end of the 15th and beginning of the 16th centuries, the greater part of Europe was approaching towards a more settled form of government than it had enjoyed for several ages before. The increase of security would naturally increase industry and improvement.